So let me ask you something. When was the last time that you have stopped to think about your strengths and your weaknesses, and not just in a job interview kind of way, but in your actual life? If you're like most people, you probably go back and forth between being proud of what you're good at and beating yourself up for what you struggle with. One day you're feeling amazing, you're crushing it, and the next you're wondering if your weaknesses are holding you back from being the person that you want to be. And I used to do this constantly, and I will put all my energy into trying to show up as the best version of myself, and only the strong and the capable parts. But when it came to the weaknesses, I either ignored them or I just let them make me feel like I was not enough. But here's what I learned. Your strengths and your weaknesses are not separate. They are actually connected. And when you try to focus only on one and you ignore the other, life is going to feel like it's unbalanced. And honestly, it's exhausting. Hi guys, I'm Andriana. Welcome back to my channel. So today we're going to talk about what it really means to balance your strengths and your weaknesses. And not in a toxic positivity way that you pretend that everything is fine, but in a way that it's honest and it's empowering. Because when you stop fighting against yourself and you actually start working with yourself and you're working with what you've got, that's when things start to change. So let's try to figure this out together. First of all, let's talk about why strengths and weaknesses are not opposites. The first thing that we need to clear up is this idea that strengths are always good and weaknesses are always bad. This mindset is way too black and white for how people actually work. Think about it this way: your strengths and your weaknesses are two sides of the same coin. You can't really separate them because they are connected. What is a strength in one area often comes with a challenge in another. And a weakness might just be this untapped strength that is waiting to be developed. So for example, if you are great at being empathetic, people probably feel very supported and very understood around you. But that same strength can make it hard to set boundaries, and you might end up overextending yourself. On the other hand, if you are indecisive, it might feel frustrating in the moment, but that same weakness, it could mean that you're someone who carefully considers your options and you avoid rushing into decisions. So neither of these traits are inherently good or bad, but what matters is how you use it and whether it's serving you in the situation that you are in. There is a double-edged nature of strengths. The truth is that most of us will love to talk about what we're good at, what we're great at, because it feels good to focus on the things that makes us shine as a person. But every strength has a flip side. And if you're not aware of it, that strength can actually start to work against you. Some examples of what I mean is that it could be a strength that you're ambitious and you're always striving for more. But that same strength can turn into a challenge if you push yourself so hard that you never take some time to enjoy what you have achieved. Another strength, it could be that you're super independent and you can handle things on your own, but that strength could turn into a challenge when you might avoid asking for help, even when it could mean that your life will become easier. Another strength is that you're incredibly detail-oriented and very thorough. But it could turn into a challenge when you can get caught up in the little things that you end up losing sight of the bigger picture. So the key here is not to stop being ambitious, to stop being independent, to stop being detail-oriented, but it's to recognize when those strengths are tipping into territory that is not helping you. So what you need to do in the circumstances is to ask yourself, is this strength helping me or am I overusing it? Am I leaning into this strength because it feels comfortable, even if it's not the best approach in this moment? You need self-awareness for this, and self-awareness here is everything. The more you understand how your strengths work, the more you can use them in ways that genuinely benefit you. An important step here is to reframe your weaknesses and to start seeing them as growth opportunities. If you're like most people, you probably feel like your weaknesses are something to fix. But what if they're actually pointing you towards areas that you can grow, you can adjust, or even you can find hidden strengths that you didn't know that you had? It could be a weakness that you are easily overwhelmed in busy or chaotic situations. But if you reframe that, you could see that that's because you're sensitive to your environment and you actually thrive in spaces where you can focus and where you can recharge. A weakness, it could be that you procrastinate on important tasks. But if you reframe it, you could see that maybe your brain needs time to process ideas before it jumps into action. For me, one of my biggest weaknesses used to be overthinking during my teenage years, and I will replay conversations in my head, I will second guess my decisions, and I will stress myself out over things that hadn't even happened yet. But when I started to reframe it, I realized that my overthinking came from a place of care. I wanted to make thoughtful choices and I wanted to show up well for the people in my life and for myself. Does that mean that I don't overthink anymore? No. But instead of fighting it, I have learned to work with it. So what's one weakness that you have been judging yourself for? And how can you reframe it as something that's not just a flaw, but it's a clue about what you need, or even a strength that it's in disguise? So your strengths and weaknesses are not separate, but they're connected. Your strengths can actually sometimes trip you up, and your weaknesses can hold hidden strengths or clues about what you need to grow. But knowing all of that is only the first step. The real change comes when you start applying it in your life. So let's get a bit more practical and let's see how you can use your strengths without overusing them. How we can set boundaries around your weaknesses and how you can create a life where both your strengths and your weaknesses work for you and not against you. Let's see how you can use your strengths without overusing them. So let's start with your strengths. Your strengths are the things that come naturally to you, that make you feel confident and that make you feel capable. But like I said before, even strengths can work against you if you lean on them too much. So for example, if you're naturally reliable, people trust you to get things done. But if you're too reliable, you might take on so much responsibility that you actually start to feel resentful or you start to burn out. If you are driven, you will probably hit your goals faster than most people. But if you never stop to rest, you will eventually run out of energy. So how do you use your strengths without letting them overwhelm you? First of all, you need to check in with yourself and ask, like, is this strength helping me right now? Or is it creating stress or frustration? Self-awareness is key here. Number 2, set limits. For example, if you're super giving, decide ahead of time how much time or how much energy you are willing to offer to others before you need to go back and recharge. And number 3, you need to diversify. If you tend to rely on one strength all the time, you need to challenge yourself to lean into other ones for some time. So for instance, if you're very independent, you need for sometimes to practice asking for help when you need it. Your strengths are powerful, but they work the best when you use them with intention and not when you burn them out unnecessarily. Now let's see how we can set boundaries around your weaknesses. The thing about your weaknesses is that you don't need to fix them to live a good life. What you need to do is to manage them so they don't hold you back. And that starts with boundaries. So let's say one of your weaknesses is procrastination. You don't need to magically become a super productive person overnight. Instead, what you could do is to plan ahead, and break your tasks into smaller steps so they will feel less overwhelming. You can set timers and you can work, for example, for 25 minutes and then take 5 minutes break and repeat that. And this is going to keep you moving without getting stuck in this cycle of avoidance. You can ask for accountability. You can tell a friend, you can tell a coworker, you can tell a family member what you are working on so they can check in with you. Or maybe your weakness is that you get easily overwhelmed when you are in social settings. You can manage that by planning your exits, and you give yourself permission to leave when you're ready instead of forcing yourself to stay longer than you are comfortable to. You can take breaks. You can step outside, for example, or you can find a quiet spot to recharge if you need to. So your weaknesses don't have to be obstacles. They are just things that you need to work around. And having boundaries makes that possible. So let me tell you how you can build your core strengths toolkit. You need to think of your core strengths toolkit as your go-to strategy for staying balanced. It's a personalized cheat sheet that is going to help you use your strengths wisely and keep your weaknesses in check. So here's how you can create your own. First, you can list your top strengths. Write down 3 to 5 strengths that you're proud of. Secondly, you need to identify your warning signs. What happens when you overuse those strengths? So, for example, if you're super detail-oriented, your warning sign might be that you're getting stuck in analysis paralysis. Thirdly, create balancing actions. For each strength, write down one action that you can take to stay balanced. So, for example, if you're over-relying on your ambition, your balancing action may be scheduling time to rest or to celebrate small wins. After you have your toolkit note, keep this note somewhere that you can see it, and you can see it regularly, maybe on your phone, maybe it could be on your journal, or it could be on your desk. And this could be a simple way to remind yourself to stay grounded. So how do we create an environment that works with your weaknesses? This might sound counterintuitive, but instead of trying to change who you are, what if you adjusted your environment to support you? So for example, if you're easily distracted, maybe you can create a workspace with fewer interruptions. You can turn off your notifications, you can use noise cancelling headphones, or you can work in a quiet room. If you have struggled with staying organized, maybe you can use tools like planners, apps. You can figure out your routines that keep things more manageable. If you overthink everything, you can give yourself time limits for making decisions. So for example, you could say to yourself, you know what, I'll think about it for 10 minutes and then I'll choose and I will move on. So adjusting your environment doesn't mean that you are avoiding growth. It just means that you're setting yourself up for success. It's very important to learn to love the messy middle. You need to understand is that balance isn't about being perfect, but it's about learning to live in the messy in between. Some days your strengths will shine and you will feel unstoppable, but other days your weaknesses might make things harder. So that's normal. So you have to accept that. The goal isn't to get it right all the time, but it's to keep trying, is to keep learning and to keep adjusting. So here are some tips for navigating the messy in between. First of all, it's very important to celebrate your wins. No matter how small, you need to acknowledge what you're doing well. Secondly, you need to be kind to yourself when you mess up. Mistakes are not failures, but they are inevitable parts of the process. Thirdly, you need to keep experimenting because life isn't static. What works for you today might need tweaking tomorrow. So the messy middle is where the real growth will happen. And the more you embrace it, the easier it gets. So here's the truth. You don't need to be perfect to live a good life. You just need to know yourself. You need to know your strengths and your weaknesses and how you can use both in a way that feels balanced and real. When I stopped fighting against myself and I started working with what I've got, everything changed. I felt less pressure to prove myself and more freedom to just be me. So that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I hope this helped. I love you, I appreciate you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.